Blackout diary. I found drunk diary entries I know I didn't write, I video recorded myself drinking, and the footage scared me sober. By username SylvesterJackBob. Also in the description of this video there is links to help you if you are suffering with addiction. Hello there, my name is Jason. I'm a recovering alcoholic. My last drink was on November 17th, 2019. Bloody hell, I can't believe it's already been a year. You see, I'm talking to you now because my counsellor encouraged me to share my story for my recovery, so I'd figured I'd give it a shot. No pun intended. Anyway, let's start the beginning, shall we? It all started one morning about a year ago, I guess. That morning, when the tremors started, I reached for the bottle again. Good old Jim Beam, I thought, never lets you down. A couple of swigs and I'll be okay. So I took one shot, and then another. Better, I thought to myself. When my hands steadied, I'd stumbled towards the bathroom, doing my best to avoid the mirror. But when I reached into the medicine cabinet, I glimpsed my reflection by accident. Ew, good God, I thought. By then I should have been used to the pasty-faced stranger who replaced a reasonably attractive college athlete I used to be, if I do say so myself. The sight of that vacant-eyed mess staring back at the mirror shouldn't have fazed me. But it was those purple rings around my eyes. I looked like I wound up on the wrong side of a fistfight. I was 25 going on 67 for fuck's sake. After being disgusted with my own reflection, I shuffled back to the bedroom. A small book propped open with a pen on a nightstand had caught my eye though. I picked it up. It was an address book I used as a diary. I read the entry, scrawled in my own sloppy handwriting, probably when I was 10 shots deep in a blackout. JJ boy, you've been bad. Sasha says she's cool with being friends, but she isn't, so you better dodge that. Note to self, check the stove. And you burnt the living shit out with that sandwich. What sandwich? I wondered. And why did I write that about Sasha? That didn't sound like anything I would say. But that wasn't what bothered me the most. I reread the name in the note, JJ boy. I never went by that name. No one called me that. At least, not anymore. Only one person had ever called me that. I can't even begin to explain how much I despised it when he did. But I didn't talk about him now. And as for Sasha, I hadn't seen her in weeks. So why did I write as though I only just seen her? I'd only remembered meeting the guys at the bar last night. But even if I had seen Sasha, I wouldn't have been rude. We were friends. Just to be safe, I checked the kitchen. The stove was off, but it glistened with grease and breadcrumbs. On the countertop sat a half-eaten ham sandwich, piled high with pickles and mustard, teetering dangerously close to the edge. I tossed the sandwich. What was I doing, I wondered, and where did those pickles come from? Better yet, what happened last night? So, after a while, I sat down and I dialed Dylan. When Dylan answered, he sounded like he'd just been run over by a semi twice. Jason, he said, his voice croaking as he yawned. Rough one, hey? You could say that, I said. Hey, I must have blacked out. What did we do after Maloney's last night? Dylan laughed through another yawn. We went to a bunch of bars, and we stopped by Sasha's on the way home, remember? Now, I didn't remember. After our 5th or 6th round of Jaeger shots at Maloney's, my mind went blank. I blacked out before, but usually I could remember something when I did, even if it wasn't much, but not this time. I needed to fill in the gaps. I sensed something else was happening. Something sinister. The next morning, after I'd gone out drinking with the boys, the tremors were vicious. My hands trembled like I was in the midst of a hypoglycemic attack and begging for a glucose tablet. I steadied my right hand with the left. Then I took a long swig of Jim Beam. I suppressed the urge to gag as the bitter liquid rushed down my throat and coated my stomach, flooding me with that familiar comfort and warmth. After my hands steadied, I grabbed the diary on the nightstand and it read, "You've been a fool, JJ boy. Friends are suspicious. Grow a backbone." Grow a backbone, I thought, shuddering. Why did that annoy me so much, I wondered. I'd never been accused of not having a backbone, but that phrasing, it didn't even sound like something I'd say. That sounded like something my mother might say if she was angry, or like something another person I used to know would say. But I didn't talk about him anymore. I dialed Dylan again. His voice was curt when he answered. "What?" he said, grunting like a Neanderthal. "What happened last night? Something weird is going on," I said, sighing. "I explain later." "Something weird," he said, laughing. "You got that right. That something weird is you. What's going on with you these days?" Dylan sighed and I waited for him to explain. "Dude, maybe you need to ease up on the drinking for a while," Dylan said. "And you know you're drinking too much if you're hearing that from me." I laughed off his comment. "Dude, really," he said, his voice rising in disbelief. Then he laughed. "You weren't yourself. And that was some hideous dancing, by the way. Never do that again." "Dancing?" I asked, horrified. "I didn't dance. Sure, I made an ass out of myself every now and then, but I didn't dance." "And you called Sasha," Dylan added. "And you're totally leading the girl on. You say you don't want to start things back up with her, but then you tell her another story. We were all right there, everyone heard it." My stomach fluttered and the adrenaline rushed through me. To think everyone witnessed some behaviour I couldn't even remember, it discomforted me. And to think I had to rely on Dylan of all people to fill in the gaps, it bothered me even more. I didn't even know what to say, I just had to find out what I was doing during these blackout spells. That afternoon I dressed and went down to the tavern to have a few beers and to clear my head. "What can I get you?" the bartender asked as grease and sweat rained down from his forehead. His brawny arms were covered in prison tattoos. Lots of dragons, hellfires and demons. He stared at me with a firm, steely gaze, the kind that promised hell to pay for anyone who crossed him. "Whatever's on tap," I said, handing him over a credit card to start a tab. It was sometime in the afternoon. I didn't bother to look at the clock. A few families ate lunch at the back tables, as a few solo drinkers sat at the bar, gazing at the TV while their minds drifted, like mine was. I'd finished a couple of beers when a familiar voice sounded behind me. I couldn't place it at first, though. "Hey there, remember me, stranger?" an older male voice said over my shoulder. I swiveled my bar stool towards him. Towering above me, in his grey business suit, was Professor Richards, my old world history instructor from my senior year of college. "No way," I said, holding out my hand to greet him. He'd been my favourite professor. He looked about 65 or maybe 70, with a white manicured Colonel Sanders-style beard, wire-rimmed glasses, and a smile that reminded me of Santa's. "Mind if I sit?" he said, gesturing towards the bar stool next to me. I waved and shook my head. "Of course not," I said, gesturing back. "Sit right here. Good to see you. You're the last person I expect to see here. Out of all the people to show up in this shithole bar," I thought, amused. "What brings you here this fine afternoon?" he asked, grinning. I shrugged. "Just clearing my head." He chuckled. "Yeah, I hear ya," he said, taking a long swig of some imported beer. He shared his popcorn with me as we caught up and ordered a few more rounds. We chatted about everything: work, school, the Dodgers and Lakers, even the history of alcohol, which he knew all about. "I bet you never knew," he said, "that the word alcohol comes from the Arabic word al-kihol, which means body-eating spirit." He grabbed a fistful of popcorn. I can't say that I did, I said, laughing but also intrigued. And that the word alcohol also originates from the word ghoul, which means corpse-eating devil, in Middle Eastern folklore, he said, raising his brows as though surprised by his own fun fact. I laughed. That's why certain alcoholic spirits are called spirits, he said, smiling. Cheers to that, I said, toasting him. He laughed, and then he continued as normal. Claims about alcohol having connections to the spirit would have been documented for centuries. For instance, the alchemists used to believe that alcohol could be used to extract the spirit from the body, which allowed room for dark entities to enter the good soul's place. I shuddered, but clung to every word. I took a long swig of beer. Like possession? I asked. He nodded. Sounds crazy now, but alchemists believed that people lost their memories during blackouts because their souls had vacated during intoxication. He said, smiling. When their souls left, malicious spirits took their place. Or so they claimed. He reached for more popcorn and took a drink. Crazy ancients, hey? He laughed. I laughed too, but a chill ripped through me. These types of accounts have always been well documented in books. For example, Man's Eternal Quest, he said as his gaze drifted towards the window. He took a long swig of beer, and then he started talking again. The ancients claimed that the intoxicated body became a vehicle for malicious spirits. They said drugs and alcohol made people more vulnerable to possession by low-frequency entities. I shook my head. It's like something from a movie. He paused, chewing his popcorn. Crazy stuff, hey? He said, laughing. I nodded. Kind of makes me want to stop drinking. He laughed. Nah, he said, you only have to worry about that kind of thing when you get blackout drunk. I forced a laugh, feeling nervous. The professor's words haunted me that night. Low-frequency entities, a vehicle for malicious spirits. As I reflected on recent events, I shuddered. What was really happening when I blacked out? The idea of possession sounded absurd, but I still wondered. I'd never been religious or superstitious. I'd never believed in ghosts. However, I was open to the possibility that the universe was full of mysteries, and that there were still many things we don't know. I was open to the possibility that my beliefs, or lack thereof, have been misguided. I hated being wrong. But still, what if? I have to find out what's really happening during my blackouts, I thought to myself. Then I drifted off into a restless sleep. The next day, when I met Sasha for lunch, she shared some unsettling news. She had barely touched her salad, looked down at her food, shuffling it around with a fork, as though as she was lost in thought. Her eyes looked nervous, but she avoided my gaze throughout most of lunch. What is it? She shrugged, tugging at her long brown curls. Sasha, I said, prodding. She then sighed. You, she started and then paused. I guess you've seen different lately. I waited for the rest. You just haven't been yourself, she said, lifting her blue eyes to meet my gaze. I sighed, not knowing what to say. So I hear, I said, remembering what Dylan told me. The other night, Sasha said, you kept calling me baby girl, like you're... She stopped, drawing her hand to her mouth, as her eyes widened with regret. Like what? I asked, frowning, leaning closer. She sighed and squirmed in her seat. I don't want to say it because I know how you feel about the subject. Just say it, I need to know. Like your brother, she blurted, her eyes widened, as though she was shocked by the bluntness of her own words, but I understood her reaction. Like Micah, she added, softly. I know it's a sensitive topic, so... Chills rushed over me, but mostly I was confused. Wait, I said, leaning closer. Why would Micah call you baby girl? That didn't make sense. But Sasha explained. Didn't you know? I shook my head. We dated, she said, looking down again. After you and I broke up that summer, he and I dated. My jaw dropped. How could I not know this? Who else knew? She shrugged, shrinking in her seat. Everyone knew, she said. It's just after he died. We knew never to talk about him. This is all true. I didn't talk about my brother, in part because I hated him. And that feeling was mutual. I hadn't talked about him in years, and no one else talked about him either. Too many bad memories with the suicide and the drinking. Even my mum didn't talk about him, and this was the first time anyone had mentioned him since he died 5 years ago. It's the first time we all talked about him since he put that gun to his head. He didn't even leave a note, and he never said goodbye. The night after I met Sasha for lunch, I'd gone out drinking with my buddies again. We met at Malloy's and I made it my personal mission to get absolutely obliterated and erase the memories of Micah from my mind. After the 5th or 6th round of shots at the bar, my mind went blank. The next morning the diary propped open on the nightstand caught my eye again. I knew the drill and this latest entry read, Dylan's got news for you, better call him JJ boy. I dialed Dylan and he filled me in. Dude, you lost it last night, he said, sounding groggy and disorientated even at 2 PM. What now? I asked, unsure if I even wanted to know. He sighed. After the bar we drove to some guy's house who was having a party, and out of nowhere your voice changed. You got all hot-headed and dictatorial, playing Backstreet Driver and shit. Dylan scoffed. But that wasn't even the best part, he said, his voice dripping in sarcasm. The highlight of the night, by far, was when you insisted that we all call you by your dead brother's name. Kind of freaked everyone out, not going to lie. Chills raced up my spine and adrenaline coursed through my body. Dylan mimicked my voice, sounding petulant. It's not Jason, it's Micah, Dylan said in a sing-song voice. Exact words. You know I wouldn't say it unless it's true. My blood froze. Every part of my body ached, and my stomach flip-flopped like I was 3 weeks deep in a cruise across the turbulent sea. The next night was November 16th. I remember it too well. I'd devised a plan, placing video recorders throughout the house. In the kitchen, bedroom, living room and bathrooms. I even used an old cell phone to capture audio of everything just in case. I needed it. I didn't want to miss a moment. I had to know what I was really doing when I blacked out. I was done relying on friends to fill in the blanks for me. Outside, the bitter air burnt my skin. Then, hours after sundown, a storm moved in, and the sky shifted from calm and crisp to violent. Thunder cracked and lightning electrified the night sky. Rain exploded and the wind whipped the ground and roared like a phantom lion. Each time the thunder clapped, the lights in the house flickered and the electricity hummed in every room. I drank alone that night, but I would capture every moment, including the parts I knew I'd forget by tomorrow. After I set up the audio and video, I broke out the Jim Beam. Then I took a long, hard swig. After 6 or 7 drinks, my mind went blank. The next day, I broke out the audio and video recordings, eager to see the footage, but I wasn't prepared for what I found. It wasn't the video footage of me standing in one spot staring at the sofa for 20 minutes that scared me. It wasn't the audio of the voice that sounded nothing like mine that scared me either. What scared me was the video footage of the man who was standing behind me, watching from the corner of the living room. The timestamp in the video showed him standing in that same position for an hour. At one point, I stood up and paced back and forth. Then I made a sandwich and played on the computer. After that I started mumbling about the weather. But then my voice shifted and deepened, changing into some other man's voice, and the voice on that recording turned my blood to ice. Micah's voice. My voice transformed into Micah's. Then the man in the corner disappeared. The audio captured his words. "Oh, JJ boy," he chided, speaking through me. "Look at you, you fool," he cackled. "Do you think you can run from me?" After that the audio stopped, and the man in the video never returned. My last drink was on November 17th, 2019. The only way I could put Micah to rest for good was to stop drinking. But that experience changed me. It changed the way I saw the world. That experience also got me sober, so maybe it all happened for a reason. But I'll admit, every now and then I feel that pull, that subtle nudge of temptation. Sometimes the thoughts of a beer drifting through my mind is like a breeze fluttering by on a warm day. Sometimes my eyes drift towards a bottle of Jim Beam on the bar shelf, and I'll remember a song that I was playing the last time I drank it. As I caressed the bottle or clutched that cold glass in my hand, losing myself in that moment, once in a while, my mind tempts me with thoughts and silly questions, like, maybe just one more drink wouldn't hurt. You can have one more drink, just one more. Can't you, JJ boy?